I got still unemployed. Well, I'm not unemployed, I'm retired. But I like to work, I'm still able to work, but right now I'm between jobs. So I have some time on my hands. It's cold and snowy outside, so I'm not going to be out mowing the lawn or cooking out today. Going for a hike or anything like that. So here I am. Going to talk about my more of my military experiences. Nothing really worth writing a book about or anything like that. Just it is what it is. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some memories I have from going to Jungle Warfare Training Center in Panama with the 82nd Airborne. And from there, we went on, and we had no idea about this at all. They didn't say anything to us about this. It really was clandestine. We boarded up on more military aircraft, and we went on a clandestine operation in Ecuador. We parachuted into that to help Ecuador break up a drug pipeline on their coast.
Correction. Due to the length of this Tim Blab session, I will cover the Ecuador mission on a separate video.
So I'm going to talk about that, but first I'm going to talk about just some memories of Jungle Warfare Training Center at what was Fort Sherman, Panama, back in the mid-'80s for me. And the U.S. gave that over back to Panama in 1999, I think per contract. But my memories of Jungle Warfare Training Center were really, at that age, I think I was 24. I mean, it was a good time. It was like, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I've heard of some people that went there say it was really difficult. I didn't find it difficult, honestly. I'll talk about a few things I remember from it. So I have some memories from that jungle experience, as well as the clandestine operation in Ecuador that followed that, which is why they sent us to JWTC and then right to the jungles in Ecuador. Mountain terrain. It was different type of terrain there. Well, at Fort Sherman, Panama, some things that stand out. We were actually training with the Australian Special Forces, their equivalent of the Australian Green Berets Special Forces, and they were impressed with me. I'm going to brag myself up a little bit, but you know, I was leading a platoon, really, or squad, I don't remember which. Well, I was part of a platoon operation, but I was in front. I was a machine gunner. Actually, they had, back then, the platoon was organized. It had 3 rifle squads of 9 men each, and a rifle squad is led by a staff sergeant, and then you've got 2 team leaders, and each team has a rifle, an automatic weapon, and a grenadier, and a team leader. So that's a 9-man squad. And the team leader is usually an E5 sergeant, buck sergeant. It could be led by a corporal. The 4th squad, which was my squad at the time, was a machine gun squad, which was made up of two 3-man crews that carried the M60, and you had an assistant gunner who carried a bag really heavy with the tripod. And this whole thing was copied off the German World War II MG42. It was the same gun with a few modifications. It was very heavy. And he had an ammo bearer, which was usually a private rifleman. And all he did was help dig the positions and cover, give security. I always used my rifleman very well because when you're dug in on a machine gun, in a defensive, they're always going to try to flank you because those guns make a lot of noise. I know my ears are ringing right now from those years. No exaggeration. Still ringing. I get $175 a month from the Army for it. I didn't want it, but they insisted I take it because I had documented hearing loss from those years firing that thing.
This is the M60. If you've ever seen Rambo or know anything about Vietnam, you probably recognize this bad boy right off the bat. It is the belt-fed .308 light machine gun that the American military used to, well, Fortunate Son intensifies. I know you've seen this bad boy on the channel before, but today it's time for its own standalone video. So let's get to it. You know, just doesn't quite feel right. This is definitely the gun of Rambo, but I just don't feel like I've got the muscle to pull this gun off and do a really good intro. So I'm gonna borrow some of my friend Bill's. Think you can take it from here?
Yes, sir. Let's go.
All right.
I like that.
But I always knew they're going to try to flank you because when you're firing that machine gun, that thing barks. It's loud. I mean, everybody's firing their rifles and you got the automatic weapons firing, but they're not the same caliber as the M60. And that really loud. Puts out a flame about that far in front of the machine gun too, and it draws a lot of attention. So I always kept my ammo bearer, which was just a rifleman, a private. I told him no matter what's going on with me and the machine gun, you always face that way, a little to our rear and off to the flank, unless I call for you. And you let me know if somebody's trying to come around on us. And that was really good. I got to say, I was a very good gunner. And here's an oddball thing I'm going to tell you about my machine gun years. I went to a thing called the Light Leader M60 Machine Gun Light Leader course, which was pretty rare. And it was taught by two men, both command sergeant majors that retired out of the Special Forces. I think it was 5th Group, Green Berets. And they taught machine gun leader tactics. And one of the guys' name was Schramm. And he made it clear that he was an ex-German soldier from World War II. And after World War II, he came to America, and because his hometown was wiped out, under Russian control, you know, at that time occupied. So he came to America and he joined the American Army and served in Korea. He served in Vietnam in Special Forces. A former German Wehrmacht soldier. He talked about he knocked out a Sherman tank with a Panzerfaust. He told us about that in class. It was pretty unusual. I could just talk about that guy. But I actually learned machine gun tactics for the M60 from a former German soldier in World War II. And his partner was a guy, Command Sergeant Major Connors. And these two guys served in Vietnam together with Special Forces. This is really just Tim Blab on military experiences. And these guys were scary. They were both retired out of the Army, but the Army had employed them to do things like teach machine gun leadership tactics to guys like me. And they showed us pictures of, they said they were on a hunter-killer team in Vietnam, where they just went out together. Connors and Schramm went out together, just freelanced, knocking off enemy, whatever they did, clandestine. They showed us pictures of some of the NVA that they'd killed. They took Polaroids of it. They were kind of scary guys. I could tell you more about them, but I won't. The irony of it is, just 3 years ago, when I was working at Walmart, I'm not proud. Job's a job. It's just money. Just because I make my money off my military pension and a few other things I've done. So, I really don't need to work, but I like to work. I'm still able to. And a little extra money is always nice. But I was delivering groceries to somebody out to their car at Walmart. And it was a young woman, looked like she was about 30. And her last name was Schramm. And I went out on a limb because this is in upstate New York 3 years ago. And I knew this guy Schramm in machine gun leadership school. And also a little bit when I was on a captain of the 82nd Airborne Rifle Team on Fort Bragg for 2 years with the M14s and the scope. Different thing. But that was Fort Bragg years and years ago. And I went out on a limb. And I talked to this young woman when I delivered her groceries to her car 3 years ago. I said, Schramm, part of me was saying, don't bring this up to her, but I did anyway. I said, funny, I had a guy that taught me machine gun leadership at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, a retired Command Sergeant Major Schramm, who served in the Green Berets in Vietnam, and he was also a member of the German Wehrmacht army in World War II. And she said, that would be my grandfather. That's what she said. Wow, what are the odds of that? She said he's in a nursing home now. He's not doing well. But she said, yeah, that would be sounds like my grandfather, because he did all that. Well, I went out on a limb with that one. She would have looked at me like I'm a nut, but no, that was her grandfather. Small world, huh? Coincidence? So I was a machine gunner, and back to Panama. And I was a pretty good machine gunner, and I was a machine gun leader. I was in charge of the weapons squad, which was 2 M60 teams full. So there were 6 of us, and I was a corporal, the senior man in that. And I figured out, we were moving through the jungle one day, playing war games, the whole platoon. And I looked at the map, and I said, I'll bet those Australians, the special forces, I'll bet they're going to try to ambush us. We're firing blanks, it's training. But you went at it full speed like it's real ammo. I mean, you trained for combat, because it was a combat unit. You train hard, real hard. I could tell you stories about fist fights and stuff like that in training. We really went all out. I said, I'll bet you, I looked at the map. I said, I'll bet up around the bend of this river, they're going to try to ambush us there. And so I brought my group, instead of taking the trails or the direction that we would to get to where we were going with a compass and a map, I went around and I ambushed the ambushers. And sure enough, they were all laid out, waiting for us to march right in front of them. And I came up from behind them and we ambushed them really good, and they were really shocked. Australian Special Forces. We wiped them out, figuratively speaking. Firing blanks and stuff and yelling and throwing grenade simulators, which were gigantic quarter sticks of dynamite. Boom! And we had an after-action review, and I remember we were all sitting down in the jungle, and the Australians, they were really impressed with me. I remember that. That felt really good to have, because I thought they were very good soldiers. And they said, this guy here, me, he said, I forgot what they said, but they really praised me up. He said, he really knows what he's doing. They better say that, because I got the drop on them, right? So that was pretty cool. That was a memory. I remember doing that, and I felt pretty proud of that. I ambushed the Green Berets Special Forces. I trained with them at Fort Bragg almost every year. We trained with them. I got the drop on them a couple times. They were really good. They very, very, very serious about their job, obviously. All right. Then another story, that this bottle came out of the jungle in Panama. This one did. I have collected bottles since I was 9 years old. And here's a picture of some of my bottle collection, because this is my show and tell, me doing whatever, and got some time on my hands. So you can see I've been collecting bottles for quite a while. That's just some of my bottles. I know bottles really well.
And here's some more.
Well, one time we were moving through the jungle in Panama during jungle warfare training school. And I don't know how this got out there. But, I had the backpack, rucksack, not backpack. I've been out for a while, backpack. My rucksack on my back, or Alice pack, we'd call it. Carrying Alice around, my girlfriend, so to speak. I think that was from the Vietnam days. They started calling it Alice because they're carrying Alice around. My Alice pack and that heavy M60 machine gun hanging on a sling, across like this. And there was this huge, huge tree in the jungle. Well, there's a lot of huge trees in the jungle, but one that really stuck out, it looked like that thing must have been hundreds of years old. And there were no houses around here. I don't know how this, there was a story behind this. I'll never know what it is. Maybe God will show me when I'm not here anymore. But I'm going to have some questions when I go before the Lord. I'm going to have some questions. A lot of questions. What was that about? Or what was that, Well, there was a pile all around underneath this tree. It was like a bottle hunter's dream come true. There was all these really old bottles. Looked like somebody had been drinking there for decades and just leaving their bottle there. But these bottles, that I collect old bottles, so I know the dates on them. They look like they're from about 1850, I'd say. Maybe 1820, early 1800s. They were all hand blown. I'd say early 1800s to mid 1800s. They're pretty old. And the bottles that I collect are mostly Pownell bottles, hand blown bottles. Well, you know, we're moving in a file and, spread out through the jungle. And they just can't stop and go bottle hunting because they're not going to stop and wait for me to go through there. So I went over there real quick with this machine gun, and I had to keep going. I didn't want to break out a formation. I just grabbed 2 bottles. This was one of them. And the other one was actually the better bottle. It was about this size, and it was really thick, bubbly glass, aquamarine colored, and it had some writing embossed on it, real crude. Bottle was probably from about 1830, I'd say is my guess. Good bottles. Like worth some money bottles. The bottles I have in my collection, I could sell easily on eBay. They're good bottles. Well, wouldn't you know it, I've got them both in my hands, and I'm just carrying them and waiting for a chance where I can somehow put them in my rucksack. And right after I grabbed those bottles, I ran back, got into my place in line as we're moving through this thick jungle. And when you know it, we're going down a hill, really steep, muddy hill that you can't walk down it. You just slide down it on your butt, really, and your back. Well, I went down there. I had really needed to hold on to my machine gun, but I didn't. I held these bottles up over my head and pretty much tumbled down the hill, but got down there with both my bottles in my hand. And at that point, I stuck them in my rucksack and kept moving. And at some point during the training, the really good one it got broke, but this one didn't. So I still have this one. Pretty old bottle. This is really old. I know that because I know some of these bottles like this are hard to date. But this one, I know the age of it by you could see like the wood, some of the things, the grain in the neck. But I also know the age of it from the other bottles that were around it. Had embossing on them, and they were Pownell, they were blown. The one I had was really a nice bottle that broke. So I put this around at the latest 1850, at the earliest maybe 1820 to 1850. I've been collecting bottles since I was 9. I know my bottles, and I sell them too sometimes on eBay mostly, but sometimes at flea markets and stuff. I know my bottles. I'm always looking for bottles when I'm out in the woods. It's harder and harder to find them because as the years go by, they're just that much further under the dirt, and all the more people have been looking for them, finding them as well. I dig latrines and stuff. So I got bottles there, and this one I still have to this day. It's even older now, about 30, 40 years older than it was. That stands out in my memory. I got the sunburn of my life there. We were at the barracks at Fort Sherman, and right in front of the barracks is the Panama Canal and the ocean, and there's a lagoon as well, and they rented out scuba gear. You could take a quick course on scuba diving there, which I didn't do. And you could actually go scuba diving, or you could rent out snorkel and fins when I was there and go diving, snorkeling. And I didn't do that either because I didn't need them. I went out in the canal end swimming with my friend Jay, Sergeant Johnson. I called him Jay, but he was Sergeant Johnson. He was a friend of mine. And we went out just swimming in the ocean, just in shorts, barefoot, and no fins, no snorkel. And and I remember diving down. There were guys out there snorkeling too, and some guys with some apparatus, scuba, with self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, scuba. That's what that stands for. I remember that. Whatever. Well, I was diving down just by myself, deeper than these guys were with the stuff. I was going past them. That was funny. see a guy down there. They really didn't know what they were doing, really. Guys snorkeling, guys with fins, and some of them had the tanks, the scuba gear. I'm out there, and I remember diving down, and there were coral reefs at the bottom of this. And I saw angelfish. It looked like a tropical fish. Well, I was in the tropics in Panama. It was really cool. And I did not know at the time that coral reefs are endangered and protected, because I grabbed a bunch of it, this white coral, really nice, and people stole this stuff. I don't have any of it. No, I got a small piece upstairs yet. Pause. I thought I had some of that coral upstairs in a box, but I don't. Yeah, everybody, you know, people took it. I know some of it is sitting on my brother Ray's, in his camp cabin that he has by a lake, sitting on a mantle over his fireplace. And I told him, I said, I said, I got that. I didn't want it back. But he said, no, Dad gave me that. Well, and Dad got it for me because I pulled that up off the floor of the Panama Canal. You can have it. He's already got it. And people stole it, but it was white coral and probably worth some money. And I probably shouldn't have taken it. But I didn't know any better. I hate to say it. But the thing is, I was getting sunburnt really, really bad. I mean, it was probably in the 90s, but you know, there was always a little breeze and it really wasn't that hot. It didn't feel hot. And I was in and out of the water. But I was getting really baked. My whole body was. Except where I had shorts on. You know, but I said, Jay, how are you doing, man? We're in the water. I said, I'm getting sunburned. He says, I'm fine. That's what Jay said. No, I'm fine. And he was a little brown anyway. So I just, judging by him, I just kept swimming. And I'll tell you something. That day, it was a Friday when this happened. We had a formation, and they said, you know, we're off till Monday. Do whatever you want. But it pretty much didn't treat you like kids. It didn't babysit you when you're off duty. But if you get a sunburn, we had been warned, be careful, because we were on the equator area there in Panama, and you could get burnt really bad being a white person. They said, and you get sunburned and you miss duty because you're sunburnt, Monday morning, you will get an Article 15. Now, Article 15 is a written reprimand where it's going to cost you, you're going to get fined. They're going to take money from you, and they could do other things. Put you on extra duty. They could do other things to you, but you're going to get in trouble with an Article 15, and it stays on your record, too. It doesn't look good. So this is Friday, and Jay said, my buddy Sergeant Johnson, or Jay, said he was fine. So we kept swimming, and I'm going down, having a great time as a young man. There's all kinds of people diving around that there, you know, Army guys mostly. And I went down deeper than all those guys. I really hold my breath for like 2 minutes or so. I could. I held my breath for 3 minutes once. And I had like a headache for a week after that. I didn't try that again. Well, I got out of the water and I was really sunburnt bad when we decided to go back to the barracks. Freeze frame. I forgot to add that when we got out of the water for the day, and I was really sunburnt, worse than I'd ever been in my life, by far. And I said, how are you doing? And he said he was fine. Then he told me he was half American Indian and that he didn't sunburn. And I was sunburned so bad, let me tell you, the next day I had water blisters. I mean, the sunburn turned into big puffy water blisters. And I had them, back then I had hair on my head. To about right here. I have water blisters on my forehead, my face, my hands, even my toes have water blisters on them. My whole body was like a second-degree burn. I was physically sick. I couldn't even get out of bed. I just laid in my cot, and some of my friends brought me some food and water. I was really sick. I was so badly sunburnt. So I didn't go anywhere Friday night, Saturday, or Sunday. I just stayed in the barracks, open bay barracks. The windows were they didn't have windows to speak of. You know, it was really nice. Just screens. I just stayed in the barracks. I was actually sick, physically ill. I got sunburnt so bad. And Monday morning came along, and I knew if I didn't show up for formation, I was going to be in big trouble. And we were going to go up in Huey UH-1H helicopters and rappel out of them that day into the jungle. That's all we were really doing, was just practice rappelling out of helicopters. You know, where helicopters hovering and you go down on a rope, but you've got your pack and your weapon. And I went up there, and I remember getting in this heli, and everything hurt. I had like 100 and some pounds, straps on my back, and the machine gun, everything hurt. And I got in a helicopter, and it was my turn where I'm rigged up to go down, and I had to lean out on a skip over the end of the helicopter, like, you know, and rappel. And I remember the helicopter guys looked at my sunburn, and they went, "Oh, man." And one of the guys on the helicopter told me, he says, the best thing you could do is go back into the ocean as soon as you get off duty today. He said the salt water from the ocean, whatever's in it, he said that will cure your sunburn. I remembered that. But he said, when it was my turn, I'm hanging, I'm like, oh, that really hurt, right? To hang there with all this blisters all over my body and all that weight, you know, my weight and the weapons and the straps. And he says, go. And I just went zing, real fast down that rope and into the jungle. And when we got off duty that day, I went back into the ocean like he told me to. And the next day, I was fine. But I didn't look like a white guy anymore. I had a sunburn in my life. I looked like I was Latino or something. I was really dark, which didn't help me out any because, I said I had precancerous spots on me from too much sun. So I wear a hat all the time. Not because I'm, trying to cover up the fact that I'm bald-headed. And when I'm outdoors, I wear a hat because I have to. I get checked every year because I should. So that stands out in my mind. We went through an obstacle course called Green Hell, which I hear people, they write about it. Green Hell and Jungle Warfare Training Course. I thought it was easy. It was an obstacle course going up under things, but there's all booby trapped because we had a booby trap course of all booby traps, things people learned in Vietnam in the jungles, toe poppers and all kinds of things, punji sticks, all the booby traps that we learned about fighting the Vietnamese in Vietnam. They put them all through this obstacle course. So you had to navigate the obstacle course and not set off any booby traps. And they gave us a training on that, how to do that, how to recognize booby traps and what to do about them, and I got through that, no problem at all. I just remember that. And I thought it was fun. You wound up going up and you wound up actually scaling down a cliff and you drop into the ocean, into the surf with waves and stuff. And then you've got to run through the surf. There's no beach to speak of. And then you got to climb back up the side of this cliff. They had cargo netting and that was the end of the course. And they took my picture, we had a photographer, Army photographer, and he took a picture of me. I remember climbing up that cliff, and it was really good. And it was on Army Times on the front cover, and I never could find it. But I thought it was a really good picture of me. I mean, I look like a commando. I looked pretty buffed back then. I've always tried to find that. I never could find it. Never. I wish I'd kept a copy. That stands out in my mind about that place. Oh, I got hit with these tree ants, the insects there. Oh my God. I'll talk about that a little bit. I was out. There's a few things actually I remember. We were out in the jungle one time, and we're out in the jungle almost all the time actually, training overnight in it, and it gets pitch black at night. But I slept on the ground, and I had a mosquito netting, really like about as big as a blanket, Army issue. I just rolled up in that like a cocoon, and you could breathe through it because it's mosquito netting, really fine mesh. And that kept the bugs off me just fine. And I could sleep. And I put guys on guard duty, all night. Everybody just doesn't go to sleep. You got to train like it's combat. And I'm laying on the ground, and I wake up and there's somebody standing next to me. And he's Corporal Shank. He's saying in a low voice, says, yeah, I'm right here. He says, I don't want to scare you, is what he said. But we've seen a black panther, and they were there. He said, walking around you. I said, oh, really? He says, yeah, I'm not trying to scare you. He said, I just want to let you know that. I said, well, keep up the good work. Thanks. And that was that. That stands out in my memory. Then we had before we went into the jungle, they gave us some classes on the jungle, the insects. There's stuff in that jungle that will kill you. There are arrow frogs, really colorful tree frogs, and they look harmless, but if you pick them up and they sweat, their sweat will go through your skin and you're dead. There's no antidote. Arrow frogs, those were there. There were very deadly scorpions, about as big as a cricket, black ones. All kinds of spiders, deadly ones. There were monkeys that followed us around that I couldn't stand. They'd throw things at you and they just followed you around. I always said I wanted to shoot one, but I didn't really. I just said that. I didn't like them. They throw things at you from a tree. There were toucans, but they said I was kind of getting whatever, you know, and they're giving us a slideshow. This was in a classroom before we went out in the jungle. Things to look out for. Then there were these leafcutter ants, and they look mean as all heck, and they're really impressive. They cut like a trail through the jungle, going out to where they had big red ants. They're about that big, red, with these great big mandibles like cutters, you know, and they look really dangerous. And their nest out in the jungle were usually a hill about as big as the room as I'm sitting in. Seriously. Could be 8 or 9 foot tall mound. Probably been there for 1,000 years. And there was a trail, 2 trails of red. One of red going out and one of red and green coming in. Like a highway that went straight through the jungle with all these ants going out to get this stuff, and red and green, a bunch of them carrying back pieces of leaves. And they look mean as heck. But you know what I did? I said, I don't think these things will even bite you, even though they look mean. I like put my boot down in the middle of their trail and they just walked over it. They didn't climb up my leg or anything. They just went around it or over it. I put my hand down in it. They didn't bite my hand. They just went over it or around my hand. They weren't interested in me at all, which I thought was pretty cool because they were about the meanest looking bug I saw out in that jungle. But then there was something that they said, these tree ants, watch out for them. And they said they like this certain type of tree. More specifically, they said they make their home in a certain type of tree. And if you touch the tree, they will drop all over you. Avoid that type of tree. Now, I paid attention to this. And they showed me a picture of the tree. I'm like, remember that tree? I took like a mental photograph of this tree. We got out to the jungle. All the trees looked like that. So that was useless to me. I'm going to make a separate video of the clandestine operation in Ecuador, because this is going on quite a ways. Well, I didn't encounter those tree ants except for once. And that's when we were crossing a stream. And it was kind of rocky and awkward with all the gear and the weapons. And I grabbed hold of a tree to catch my balance. And I swear it felt like somebody sprinkled stuff all over me. It just really felt like I felt little things sprinkling all over me. And I thought, what the heck? And then, ow! All of a sudden, like I'm getting my neck, all my exposed skin was getting tore up by these things. And I looked at my hands. I had them on my arm and my hands. And I seen these little tiny black ants about that big, really harmless looking. I seen one, there were a bunch of them. One was on my hand and he had hold of my skin and he was like tugging at it with his man. It was like, I said, ah! I threw my helmet off, threw my gear off. I had them all over my clothes. I took my clothes off, shook them off. And the guy in front of me and the guy behind me, I reacted first and like, what's up with him? Then they're like, ah! They got ate up too by these bugs, these ants. They took off. They're like, what's up with him? I like threw my helmet, everything off, gun down, rucksack off. And they're both looking at me, then like, what's up with him? Then they got it next. And they didn't do any harm to us at all, but it was enough to get your attention. And I almost got in trouble for that because you're not supposed to carry on like that when you're out there. But they didn't know I was getting ate up by these friggin' ants. And I remember that. I remember one time we got lost. I don't think we were ever officially lost, but I wasn't leading the way this time. We were out in the jungle for a while and weren't sure where we were. So no big deal. You just take your compass and you shoot an azimuth dead east. You're going to come into the ocean. You can't miss the ocean, right? Well, we came out, all of us, in our uniforms and all our guns and stuff, and we came out on a beach they called Devil Beach. I don't know why, but it was a nudist beach. And we come walking out of the jungle, and all these local Panamanians were in the ocean swimming nude. A lot of women, really, a lot of women. And I'm like, wow. And they're like, oh, they all saw us. And they're not dressed, they're naked. And some of them ran to their cars naked, grabbed their towels and ran to their cars. And some of them went deeper into the water to cover up. That stands out. And we just followed the beach back. And we're yelling, hey, all right. You know, and we followed the beach back to Fort Sherman, our barracks. But I remember that, coming out on a nudist beach with those guys. On a darker note that some of you might not find humor in, but I remember going to Panama City, and they bust us there on a Friday, and we didn't have to be back till Monday morning for duty. Now, some of you aren't going to like this story, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. I had a guy in my machine gun squad, Private Powell, and Private Powell was 18 years old, Private Powell. Blonde-haired guy, very well brought up, Christian man, very proper kind of guy, you know, well-spoken, educated. Powell was a virgin. He'd never gotten drunk. He'd never been with a woman. And some of the other guys in my squad, like, we're going to take you out to Panama, right? We're going to get you drunk and, laid. I'm sorry if I offend anybody with this, but this is facts of life. And I told Pal, see, I was married at the time, and Sergeant Johnson, Jay, the guy that I went swimming with, we palled around a lot. He was married too, both of us, married with kids. We had no intentions to cheat on our wives. And but we knew temptations come, and we both decided, hey, let's you and me stick together this weekend, and just we'll go do whatever there's to do besides getting with the women. And he said, yeah, that's a good idea. I said, I don't want to come back to my wife as a cheater. Neither of us wanted that, or catch some disease from some prostitute in Panama City. You know, we didn't want that. So I told Pal, I said, look, hey, because all the guys were telling they were going to take Pal to Panama City and going to hook him up in a whorehouse, and there were plenty of them there, bordellas. I'll talk about that. And they were going to get him drunk. And I said, you can stick with Sergeant Johnson and me. And, I said, you don't got to hang out with those guys. They're going to get you into trouble. No, he wouldn't have any of that. So he went with them. Well, before we got on the buses at Fort Sherman to go to Panama City and do whatever we do, I said I had my squad in formation, and they were all lined up at attention. I called them to attention, and I'm standing out in front of them, and I'm talking to them because there was we were warned, there was a lot of, the police were corrupt, and there was a lot of prostitution and a lot of venereal diseases that came with that. And there was a lot of, you could get ripped off, and the police, like I said, were corrupt. You could wind up in jail, and if you didn't have any money, good luck getting out. And you'd get out eventually, being a U.S. soldier there at the time. So I'm giving these guys a safety briefing before we all got on the bus, and everybody they were going to go nuts in Panama City, and they did. And I'll talk about that. So I told them each, put your right hand out. And they're like, what? I said, just do it. So all the guys put their right hand out like that. And I walked by each of them, and I put a bunch of condoms in each one of their hands. And they're like, what the heck? So they're like, what are you doing? You know, I was just a corporal. It wasn't like I outranked them, but not by much. And they're like, what's this? I said, just take them, put them in your pocket. I got them from the medic, a whole bunch of them. I gave them each condoms, including Powell, and I said, don't come back here with any venereal disease. They specifically had one called the black syphilis that there was no cure for. You had it for life. Don't come back here Monday morning with any diseases. I don't want to, you've been warned. And I said, you stick with Johnson and me. We're going to gamble. They had, gambling was legal, like slot machines or, casinos and stuff. We're going to drink some beer and gamble. That's it. And we're going to watch out for each other. No, they weren't having any part of that. See, I was 24 years old. That's old to these guys who were like 18, 19. McDonald, an Irishman, really rowdy guy. Shoon, he was a corporal too, Specialist Shoon. And the other guys, Powell, I forget the other guy's name. But we went to Panama City, and those guys got off the bus, and they disappeared. They were going to stick around with us, two married men with families. So Johnson and me, I remember we were in a bar or a bordella. I had no experience with this stuff. But it was a bar downstairs, a nice bar too, kind of really old-fashioned. Everybody spoke Spanish. But upstairs was a whorehouse. And all those pretty women that were in that bar, that's where they earned their money, upstairs. I've never experienced this before. Well, I'm with Sergeant Johnson. And all of a sudden, these really gorgeous women are being very friendly with us. And we're just there to drink beer, honestly. And the beer was very weak, as I recall, Atlas beers. Like, you couldn't get really too drunk off it because it was very weak beer, but it was good beer. What happened? This one woman was hitting on me really hard, and it's really a very attractive woman. And she cuzzles up to me, and she wanted a cigarette. She didn't speak any English. I said, oh, you can have a cigarette. I put one in her mouth, and I lit it. And she's like looking at me, because I smoked back then. I quit, but I smoked. And she's like getting closer to me, and she had this cigarette in her mouth, and this arm comes out of nowhere between her face, from behind me, and my face, and she's smiling. This arm just come out and went like that, like snicked fingers, and it snapped her cigarette in half, and it was hanging halfway down, and she's like looking at it cross-eyed, with this cigarette broke in half. She's like, huh? I turn around, and it's Johnson, and I forgot about him. That he said like that to me, I said, oh yeah, and I said to the woman, married, I showed her my wedding band. No, actually, before that happened, I said, go away, man. Yeah, before he did this, I said, go on, get lost. I said, sorry about him. I took another cigarette and I put it in her mouth. I went to light it, and once again, his hand came up, snapped her cigarette in half, hanging in her mouth. And she's like, that's when I turned around, what are you doing? And that's when he went, I said, oh, that's right. I remembered because the day had been going on. I've been drinking some beers. You can be tempted. And I said, I'm sorry, married. Showed her my wedding ring. And she was good about it. And she smiled and laughed. And that was the end of that. Well, I thank my friend Johnson, Sergeant Johnson Jay, for that. Later on, I would do the same because later on he was determined to hook up with some of these hookers. They were very seductive. And when it became night, I'm not putting anybody down, but it seemed like every woman at nighttime in Panama City that was out had a price. And I'm sure they didn't, but it seemed that way. And at that point, I was I kept him out of trouble, and it wasn't easy, but I did. So we looked out for each other, him and I, married men honoring our wedding vows. But you can be tempted. You're supposed to flee from temptation. I've never been in situations like that. I've never been around that thing. That sort of stuff. Well, that night, Johnson and I didn't see the other guys in my platoon. We got on a bus. We didn't even know where the bus was going. And we wound up out in the jungle. The only Americans there, white guys, well, Latinos and stuff. And they had this big party going on in the jungle with lights, like Christmas lights, all up in the trees. And they had somebody that had music going, playing like a DJ out in the jungle. and the bus was there. And I said, man, we're the only Americans here, you know, at nighttime out in the middle. I didn't even know where we were. But you know what? We went out, we danced with them and drank with them, and everybody was really cool. We didn't have a problem, which I was grateful for. Well, we eventually, the weekend's over. That's it for Panama City. I get back Monday. And wouldn't you know, our man, Powell, he got drunk and he's no longer a virgin. I gotta watch my language on this channel. And I said, what happened? And Sean himself, and Sean wound up catching Black Siph. He wound up sick. Later on, he had problems. He had to see the medic. He caught the black syphilis for life. That's what I was told. And he was not a very happy man at age 20 with an incurable STD. And I said, why didn't you? I said, I gave you condoms. And he said, everything happened so fast, and they'd been drinking, not beer, but liquor. And those women were professionals. And everything happened so fast, he said, I didn't even think of it. And that's sad. The guy's probably about my age now, if he's still around. He's still got it. Probably, maybe they cured it, I don't know. That happened. Our platoon sergeant caught the same thing, it turned out. At least that's what I was told. And that's Panama City. And my father went through there in the Navy in World War II. And I told him about this back then. And he said that they let these guys go as well on leave. And he said it was the same way back in World War II. The same exact thing. It hadn't changed. You know, at that point, like over 40 years later, it was the same thing, his experience. So that was Panama. What else was there from that? Oh, there was this one sergeant. He was not very popular at all. He wound up getting kicked out of the Army because he couldn't do his job. I don't know how he ever got promoted, quite frankly, to sergeant, to his position. Well, I do have an idea, but I won't say it here because it might be politically incorrect. But we were going out for 3 days on your own. You had to navigate through the jungle all by yourself. And usually you could get done in one day, actually one day. They dropped you off out here and you had to navigate all the way back by yourself. It was supposed to be one day, sorry. And it wasn't really that hard to do. You know, if you knew what you're doing with a compass and a map and a protractor. This guy didn't know what he was doing. So yeah, I remember one of the guys' name was Special Steves. Everybody was a friend of mine, almost in that platoon, everybody really. And this guy I'm talking about was not in our platoon. He was in our company. And he said to Special Steves told me this. He said the guy came up to him right before they set him loose with a compass and a map. He says, hey, Special Steves. And this guy was a staff sergeant. He says, show me how to use this, a compass and a map. You're supposed to know this. By the time you're staff sergeant, you should know this. By the time that's basic stuff for the infantry. And Steve said, and if I had a compass in front of me, I'd show you, but it had a thing that folded so you could use it like a sight. And Steve said, oh yeah, Sarge. He didn't like this guy. He said, hey Steve, show me how to use this, thing. Will you please? And he said, oh, I'll be happy to, Sarge. And he took it. He said, you just point it the way you want to go. And then he said, fold that down. And he said, you're on autopilot. And he walked off. I remember that. He told me this. Well, we all went out and he says, oh, and this guy got lost and they found him 3 days later walking along some road. 3 days later, this guy was lost in the jungle for 3 days till he was found. I remember that. I thought that was pretty funny. Killer bees, we encountered those. They swarmed an MP Jeep. Nobody was hurt. Nobody was in the Jeep, but they were all over it. A big swarm of killer bees. And they cordoned the area off and they gassed them. So I got to look, what's a killer bee look like? They look about as big as a fly. But their strength is in their numbers and and their size, they're small. They'll go down your windpipe. It sounds gruesome, but that's how they kill you. That and stings. So I got to see what those look like. I don't know, a bunch of other stuff. I really enjoyed it, honestly, Jungle Warfare Training Center. And we got the badge that you wear on your uniform. And our first sergeant, who was a Vietnam vet in the 1st Cav, extensive combat service, he said, and he wasn't putting us down for it, he says, it says jungle expert. He says, I assure you, you're not a jungle expert. He says, you're at best jungle familiarized. And he was right, you know, because we go off on a clandestine mission in Ecuador after we got out of there. And I'll tell that on another lengthy Tim Blab video, what I remember about that. A real world mission in Ecuador that we didn't know, nobody knew anything about it. So what else? Oh, almost got in a fight at a bar with my friend Sergeant Buchanan, Buck, the one I talk about, who did some things in the church, and I believe he did not go, I think he went to hell. Well, everywhere I went with this guy, he's always trying to get us into barroom brawls with people. But I'm not going to talk about that one. Should I? Actually, I have very few pictures of my time in Panama because like only one roll developed and my camera was ruined from the salt air. Or should have known it would have been. Because it was a 35 millimeter camera. We were drinking at, they had a bar called the Jungle Club at Fort Sherman, NCO Club. We were drinking beers there, and well, he tried to get us into a barroom brawl with some of the people not in our company. I'm not going to talk about that one. Sorry. I'm going to talk about another experience, Operation Display Determination, that took place in Kurdistan in the Middle East. And I'll talk about some things that he did there. But this one I'm not, because he tried to turn it into a race riot, a race fight. Actually, he wasn't. I guess I'll tell you about it. He was trying to pick a fight with some of the guys in there. It turned out it was almost all black. As the night went on, him and I were the only white guys in there. And that didn't bother him in the least bit. He's still trying to pick a fight with these guys. And nobody wanted to fight him, but one guy did. And Buck wasn't afraid of him at all. And I thought it was very foolish because we were definitely outnumbered there. And I didn't want any part of any fights. I'm not that kind of, just pick a fight with people. I wasn't a brawler, but I've been in some brawls, but only because I found myself in that. Well, we decided, we went out to leave, and this guy was black that he was trying to pick a fight with. This guy was a jerk. The rest of the black people in there were just fine, but this guy was like my friend. They were both jerks, both of them. Didn't matter his skin color. But he tried to stir up, the black guy tried to say we were trying to start a race fight, which none of the other black people in there believed him. They didn't want any part of any trouble, you know what I mean? So this guy went out, the black guy went out, and he was looking for people, black guys, to ambush us when we left the bar. And he found the black guy all right. Big guy, strong guy, tough guy. Just happened to be my friend. And he happened to be a good friend of mine, Sergeant Farlow from Detroit. And we left the place. And that guy was out there with this other guy who was a troublemaker, really. He was a worse troublemaker than my friend Buck. And Farlow had a pistol belt. Like a pistol belt, really heavy belt, canvas belt that all your gear hangs on around your waist. And Farlow was whipping this guy with it. And he said, first he said, "Are these the two guys you're talking about?" To the other black guy. It was nighttime. And he says, "Yeah." He says, "Oh, really?" And he started whipping the heck out of that guy with his pistol belt. He said, "Those happen to be my friends in the company." He didn't hurt anybody, but that dude ran off, and that was the end of that. We all had a pretty good laugh. And fortunately, nobody was hurt badly or worse, or arrested, or killed, or injured. And we all had a really good laugh about that, all of us. Farlow and me and my friend Buck. Freeze frame again. Editing this video, I have to add that Norm Sergeant Farlow was Norman Farlow, who stayed with Charlie Company 2nd 504th. And I think he became their first sergeant, somebody told me years later. But he said that night that he heard about some kind of dude calling for a race riot in that bar, and he thought that Buck and me were in trouble. So he came out with his pistol belt, looking to back us up when this guy confronted him. And that's when he said, "These are the two guys you're talking about?" That's pretty cool. You don't meet friends like that too often in your life, honestly. But Sergeant Farlow was one of them. But everywhere I went with Buck, he was bound to try to get us into a brawl. And he wasn't a racist. He just liked to be in the center of trouble. I don't know. He's a rowdy guy. So I wound up sharing that. And the picture, actually, one of the ones I have, I don't know if I have it, but they had women dancers. I'm not going to show that. It's the Army, all right? It's the old Army. You're going to come across that kind of stuff. And I didn't participate in that kind of stuff because I was married with kids and a Christian. But I found myself out with the guys and a lot. And these are guys I'm supposed to go to combat with. So it's the way it is when you're in the Army. So that's it. I'll close this up by saying that we went to, we got on buses, and instead of flying back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, we got on military aircraft, and we were going on a mission somewhere, and nobody would tell us where it was. But we had jungle fatigues, we had weapons, loaded up, and we rigged up in parachutes. So wherever we were going, we were parachuting in. And nobody, I don't think anybody in my company knew where we were going, because we didn't need to know, until we got there. There were some national incidents going on where some of the countries around there were threatening to shoot down any aircraft of Americans. I don't think we were exactly wanted in some of the places we went. So I'll talk about that perhaps in another story. A clandestine operation in Ecuador. We would wind up going there to help their soldiers and police break up a drug pipeline that was supplying drugs all the way up the coast to America as well. So that was my memories of my experiences at Jungle Warfare Training Course at Fort Sherman, Panama. All in all, good memories, honestly. And when I got home from all that, I was so tan, I swear, but that didn't last long. Oh, one other thing. The bug dope they gave us, we call it bug dope, but the insect repellent they gave us back then was carcinogenic. They'd find out. I put that stuff on the back of my neck, and my whole neck turned into a scab, and the whole back of my neck turned into one big scab. And I got 2 wrinkles at age 24, like an X on the back of my neck. They're still there. And the guys used to joke that I got cross rifles. That's the infantry insignia, 2 rifles crossed. They said, "You got cross rifles on the back of your neck." I remember that. So, oh yeah, one other thing. I caught tuberculosis. I would find out. I wouldn't find that out till months later at Fort Bragg. But I was coughing up blood a lot, and I felt weak. But I was really young and in shape then. And I had some x-rays, and they showed me the scar tissue. And the doctor said to me, "Where have you been in the world, in the past year?" And I told him, Panama and Ecuador. And we ate some stuff. I forgot to bring this up. I ate shish kebabs with monkey meat. I didn't know it. The locals were selling us for a quarter or whatever we'd barter cigarettes. These shish kebabs, bamboo shish kebabs with meat. It was really tasty, a lot better than the Army food they were giving us. And the doctor said, "Well, between the water down there," I forgot to bring something else up, "and the meat that you ate, you caught tuberculosis. And I said, oh. And I told him I'd been coughing blood up for months. But I didn't think anything of it, duh. Until at some point I went to the doctors. And then he said, but you were young and your body beat it. But I caught tuberculosis when I was down there. Something I forgot to bring up. When we were in the jungle, the guys all ran out of water. Their canteens, you had 2 quarts of water on you. And 1 big quart. You had 2 quarts, and you had 1 big, like, half-gallon jug that they gave us to carry. And some of the guys ran out of water. They all did in my platoon. And they were so dehydrated, they were getting delirious. Some of them. I'd seen heat stroke. I'd seen heat exhaustion. I've seen plenty of it. And I saw some down there. But I never had it. I've always dealt well with the heat. And I forgot about this experience. And these guys, there was the water in the jungle, it's so stagnant. It had like orange debris, like all kinds of nastiness in it from jungle rot and vegetation that had been sitting there underwater for ages. Don't drink that water. I kept telling them this. We had water purification tablets and these iodine pills that you're supposed to use. And I don't know, they didn't have any left. They were out of water. And there were a few guys that were getting delirious. They were singing happy birthday and just acting like they were on drugs. They were so thirsty. I gave these guys my water. But then I ran out of water. But I didn't need it. I really did pretty well. I don't know why. I always did very well. And I kept telling the guys that we'd come across this place in the jungle where there's this really funky, like stagnant water sitting on the ground, the jungle floor, with all kinds of crap floating in it from the jungle, that, nasty, orange looking stuff. And I said, don't drink that water. Don't. I couldn't stop some of them. I said, I promise you. I had to say this. I didn't know for a fact. But I said, just over the next hill, there's going to be a waterfall with clean water. And generally, if you got running water, and if this is a rock in a stream, and you got running water with white water burbling, you fill your canteen up here in front of that. And generally, ideally, you would want filtered water. But if you've got to drink water out of the jungle, get it running water in a stream. And I said, if you just wait till over the next hill, there's a waterfall and a stream with clean water. And they believed me, fortunately, because I was trying to stop them from drinking this water. And I was leading them. And I remember a couple of the guys drank that water anyway. I couldn't stop them. And if they would have become a heat casualty, it would have been hard getting them out of the jungle to get medical help. But I tried to stop them. I didn't drink any of it. Most of the other guys didn't either. We got over the hill. There was a waterfall. And I kind of knew there would be one. You could tell by looking at the map. Or if you see a cliff, there's probably going to be a waterfall. And nice, clear, bubbling water. And these other guys had drank from that stagnant stuff like 30 minutes earlier. So I didn't catch anything. Maybe that's where I got tuberculosis. I don't know. But yeah. Well, when we got back to Fort Bragg a few weeks later, one of the guys in the platoon that drank that water, I remember him. And he was a Latino guy from down around that area. We had a couple guys that joined our unit, and he should have known better. And he said, oh my God, he flipped out. This is going to gross you out. Warning, this is gross. But he come and said, look at this in the toilet. And I never did this before, but he wanted me to see this because he was freaking out. So I go in the latrine in our barracks where he pooped out a log, natural looking, but swimming around near his turd, it's gross, I'm sorry, was a worm about that long swimming around in the water. So I told him, get a jar, scoop that worm out of there. And he caught some parasites. They sent it off for testing. And sure enough, he caught some parasites, which they cured. Fortunately, it would have caused him problems if he didn't catch it. I remember that, which is kind of gross, but it's the Army. It's what it is. So we're leaving Fort Sherman, Panama. And we went, it seemed like it was Fort Richardson. I forget the Air Force Base. It's not Fort, it would have been a base. Richardson Air Force Base comes to mind. I'm going to check it out. And if it's not Richardson, I'll post it on here. But we got on these C-141s and jet aircraft, troop transport jet. They've been replaced since by C-16, I believe, but Starlift, whatever. We got on these jet transports, shooted up with parachutes, loaded up to the gills. Didn't know where we were going, but we're going somewhere. And for some reason, every time I smell like diesel, like jet fuel, I just remember standing behind the jet turbine exhaust on the tarmac when we're standing out before we loaded up on the back of these planes, these jets. Every time I smell that smell, like in an airport, like jet liner exhaust, it kind of takes me back to that time. You know, strange, isn't it? Certain things can take you right back, like a smell or a sight or a sound. That always takes me back to standing out there. So we didn't know it, but we were headed towards Ecuador, towards the coast, the west coast, to do take part in help them break up a drug pipeline there. And that is another story. And if you stayed on this long, well, I hope it was worth your time. But I got not much going on right now. I'm not doing the candles right now because they were honestly bothering my sinuses quite a bit. And my sinuses are getting better since I haven't done that. Lo and behold, maybe the candles was doing it. I read that candles can be very, very toxic. I wasn't aware of that. And here I am with candles all around me in this little room. But either way, I'm not doing the candles, and I'm using my phone for a camera. I'll go back to the candles now and then. Yeah, and I'm not doing much, and there's, I'm praying to God every day and hanging in there. I know God has a purpose for everything, but I've got nothing to do except practice my music, do this, maybe tell some stories on here. Nobody visits me, nobody calls me. I'm still hoping to go to France. My friend from France calls now and then. My son lives up north, gets hold of me, so I'm not 100% isolated. Now and then my friend Tom will pop in for a beer on a Friday evening, now and then. But that's it. Still trying to find a job, and I can't. But I have 2 job interviews next week, so I'm hopeful. So you get what you get. I've got paranormal things going on in my life right now, for sure. I can tell you I have a visitor, and I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to talk about it right now. So I might recover some old stories, or I might tell some of my Army exploits. I might play some music, because it's something to do. And this thing's probably an hour long at this point, but no, whatever, it is what it is. Nothing else. All right, take care. God bless.